Hello lovely ones. I thought I would share with you some of the amazing connections that I've had, and I thought that would help us just to understand that we're not alone in this world and that life continues beyond this awareness that we have of our human reality. So the first story I'm going to tell you in this little video is about my darling mummy. My Bubby and I were living in Colorado, and we came back so that we could be with my mum for her end of life journey. And that work is so beautiful, and that space of being is so beautiful, that if we ever have an opportunity to be beside someone who is releasing themselves from this life journey, it truly is the most remarkable space to be in with one that you love and care for. So coming back into the space and being here with my mum and spending a few years with her before she passed was just so beautiful. It reconnected the mental telepathy bond that we'd had as when I was a child and growing up through the years. My mum and I were always able to do mental telepathy. And I would be at school and sick and need to go home, and those long days before cell phones and easy communication, I would just send my mum a message, and the next thing she'd be driving up the driveway at the school and picking me up and taking me home. And I had numerous incidences with this. Another time when my beautiful little dog, my first little dog Fudgy, was very ill. She just suddenly got ill. And I didn't have a phone, and there was no phone at my home. I was married at that time, and I just panicked. I ran out into the road with my little dog. She'd collapsed, and my neighbor was driving down on his way to work. And I said, please just quickly give me a lift to the vet. And that was just a little way down from where we lived. And I got a lift, and then I realized I had no bag, I had no money, I had no anything. I just had my dog in my arms. And here I was, and no way of connecting with my mum other than having to ask the receptionist if I could use their landline. And so I just thought, well, I'll just give my mum a call, and called her in my head and just sat and watched the window to see if my mum would pick up my message, and sat and looked out at the window where the road went past, and a few minutes later saw my mum up the road. Coming to see me, and in a great urgency. Obviously she picked up my message, and no sooner she passed by, and I said, no mummy, not at home, at the vet, and she turned around and came into where I was at the veterinary offices. So isn't that amazing, that connection? And we just proved this again and again and again. So I'm telling you this because that connection that we had continued beyond. When my mum passed, it continued into that space. And I was so grateful for that connection, because nursing her and being with my mum through that time, there comes a time when someone is unable to communicate, and in that time then I was able to know exactly what it is that would bring her comfort or release or help or assistance just by listening to her thoughts. So that was beautiful. Okay, so now we come all the way to the moment that my mum is right near the end of her life, and we'd been knowing that this was going to be imminent at any day now. And I was absolutely exhausted from the caregiving, as I'm sure many of you know what that's like. And I eventually said, I just have to go and have a decent sleep, and just wake me up if there's any change. Said to my daddy, wake me up if there's any change. And went to bed. Bubby and I were staying in a little apartment above the garage at my mum and dad's home. So I wasn't right in the house. I was just a little way away from the house. And when I had gone into a deep sleep and woke up with an incredible pain in my chest, that I woke myself up with screaming out loud, because the pain in my chest was so bad I thought I was having a heart attack. And shortly after that, my dad did our little family whistle, and that little whistle said, my darling, come now. And I walked downstairs, and my mummy had just passed at about the time that I'd felt that amazing heart pain. My dad told me as well that he was lying next to mummy and putting a little bit of glycerine on her mouth to help keep her mouth and her lips moist. And he was looking at her and just looking and noticing that her breath was becoming slower and slower. And he said he rolled onto his back and he suddenly felt this overwhelming pain in his chest. And his words to himself were, "Oh, I'm going to die of a heart attack. I always knew I would die before my Gwynnie." And those were his own words to himself. And in that moment, my mummy passed. So I do believe that at that same moment that I had that wrench through the heart, my dad was having the same experience, and my mummy was pulling away from us at that point. Dad said that as he felt this pain, this pull in his heart like that, he just surrendered into it, knowing that he was going to die before my mummy. And as he lay there and surrendered into it, he could feel himself moving upward with my mum. He was aware of my mum's energy pulling up out of her body, and he was aware of himself pulling out of his body. But of course he didn't keep going. He came back down into his body, and my daddy is still with us, 86 years old and fabulous. So that connection was incredible. And then when my mummy passed, there was this long space that felt very long for me, because it was a couple of weeks, that there was absolutely no communication. I couldn't reach Mum, I couldn't connect with her, and I could not understand why. And besides the feeling of being bereft, the feeling of not being able to connect to my mum for the first time in my entire life was devastating. And I said to my darling sister, I said, "You know what, Mum, and I've always been able to do this. I have got to be able to connect with her. Surely I have got to be able to do that." So what I did, I went and sat on her bed, and I sat and relaxed and just breathed and just said, "If there is any way that I can connect with you, please help me to do that. Please let me talk to you." And I felt myself pull up and out of my body and come into the space. When I could see it, it was so clear. I could paint it or draw it. It was so absolutely clear. Still is to this day. Came into this big open space, and it was bright, bright, bright light. So bright that it was almost blinding, the white light in this space. And it looked like a hospital ward almost, but there were no walls. It was just an open space, and there were lots and lots of beds in it, but I was not aware of anybody else in the beds in the rest of the space. And at the far end, almost half a rugby field away, or a football field away from me where I was standing, I was shown an image of a person lying in a bed, and around this person were tall light beings doing this with their hands, long streams of divine light, white light, just pulling off their fingers, and they were doing this. And they were just pulling this beautiful light, laser light energy off their fingertips and onto this beautiful being that was there. And I said to the guide that was standing next to me here, "But what's going on?" And they said to me, "Your mum is being healed from all the trauma of this life journey." And that was just horrific for me to hear. Wonderful, but also so sad, because my mum truly was, she was so beautiful. We used to call her Queen, because she was like a queen. And in the later part of her life, my mum developed incredible, they called it post-polio syndrome, but I think at that point that was the best explanation they could give for it. But her body became very crippled, and she couldn't swallow, she could barely talk, she battled to breathe. Everything she ate got stuck in her throat and caught in her throat, and she would throw up. It was really, really, really hard. And walking on the beach was my mummy's absolute favorite thing, and she couldn't do that anymore. Walking was so challenging, so difficult, and it just progressed to her being in a wheelchair and then not being able to walk at all. So all of that compounded sadness, and of this amazing, beautiful light being that she was for all of us, and then coming into this very crippled, dependent, reliant state. I think it must have been awfully challenging for my mum as such a free, light spirit being. And so when I heard that, I just thought, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how hard this journey was for my mum. I was so grateful for the picture, and then felt myself come back into the space, and then I just cried and cried and cried and cried. It was so beautiful, but it was so sad. So there we came to that point, and I thought, okay, now I've just got to wait. I've just got to let Mummy come through this space of this profound healing. And for whatever reason, our time is not the same as the time in the divine realm. And so I was shown that little point of time, that little picture of time. So now another few weeks go by, and my beautiful sister is about to change so many things in her life. Sell her home, had been in the market for a long time. She was separating from her man, her husband. She was changing jobs. She was moving to another province or state, as you might think about it in America. And there was all the stuff going on, all these transitions going on in her life. And Linda says to me, well, for goodness sakes, Joy, surely Mummy is healed by now and she'll be able to give you some explanation. I need to know if this is all on target, and I need to know if everything's going okay and if I'm making the right choices. So I said, right, Linda, I'm going to go and sit on the bed and connect again and let me see what comes up. So I did that again, sat in Mummy's bed, did the deep breathing, relaxed, surrendered, and felt myself moving up again. It was too wonderful. This time, the picture in front of me opens up, so clear, so beautiful, this amazing landscape with these beautiful rolling kind of earth mounds. Made me think a little bit of Teletubby land, I must tell you. Beautiful green and vast open trees and grass and soft meadows and a stream, and just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I'm standing there and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, okay, so where am I? And I see there's a little dirt path, a little pathway in the grass, on this little hill that I'm standing on. And I see this little path that's in front of me it was probably about, sorry for the throat, energy always catches my throat. It was probably about 2 meters away from me, probably about 3 yards or so away from where I was standing. And then I see in the distance, there's some young people running on this pathway towards me. And so they run, and then the path curves just in front of me. And the first young person comes running along and runs along this path, doesn't even see me. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth person goes past, running past me like this. And I'm thinking, what is this that I'm seeing? And the age of this group of young people, I would say, was between about 15 and 17, somewhere around that age group. So they were like a little bit older teenagers. And so they're running past, and the next thing, the person right at the back comes running and stops dead in the pathway and looks at me and says, Joy, what are you doing here? With my mom's voice. And I'm like, oh, now I'm like shocked. I couldn't believe it. And it was my mum when she was a young girl, running. And this was the picture of her running and free and open and happy and laughing. And I said, yes, Mum. She says, yes. I said, Mummy, I wanted to ask you a few things. Is it okay? She says, she's like impatient almost. She goes, okay. And then she puts up her hand and she shouts to the friends, I'll be with you now. And off they go running, and then my mum stands there, and I have a conversation with her. It's like, oh my word, how does this work? So I said to her, Mummy, I need to ask you a few things. Linda's about to move, and all these things are happening in her life, and I just want to know if it's going to be okay. She goes like this. She almost shuts me up mid-sentence. She puts her hands up in front of her, and she goes, it's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine. And she just does that. No more conversation about Linda. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, that's why I came, to have this little conversation. And so now I'm kind of standing there thinking, well, what else? And Mummy's impatient. I can see her. She's like, come on already. And so I quickly say to her, Mummy, what about David, our brother? What about David? And then my mum became very somber, and she said, David has a very challenging life journey. Oh, and then I just started to choke up, and my heart was just aching then for that. Then I asked about my dad and got some information. And then I thought to ask her about the child that she lost before she had the three of us. Her very first child she lost, and he was born but didn't survive very long. And I said, Mummy, what about your first baby? And she goes, lights up, and she says, oh, he's here, he's beautiful, like this. Oh, I just go goosebumps when I feel that energy of it. And by now I've run out of things to ask her, because I didn't expect this conversation to be going this way. And Mummy says, okay. And then off she runs. Ching, she's gone. I'm standing there, and then I'm going like, now what just happened? And boom, back down into the space that where I was sitting on her bed. Just like that. And then again, of course, I cried my eyes out, phoned my darling sister. I said to Lindy, had a little chat with Mum. Apparently everything's fine on your side, nothing to worry about. Everything's good. She just wouldn't even discuss it. It's all going to be fine. And, you know, within 2 days, everything that Linda was waiting upon just worked like this. The house got sold, the ding, 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 the job came up, everything just went ding, 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 ding. It was almost like someone had pushed over these little dominoes, and they just fell, and the pathway opened, and she did step into a different life, a different reality for herself. Amazing, isn't it? Just amazing. Phew. So I've told a few people the story. It's hard to tell the story because it sounds a little loopy, doesn't it? But for those of us who know that life continues beyond this mortal form, and that the connection is there if only we're willing to open it, and the truth of this and the image of this and the knowing of it, the deep knowing in my soul, it really is a great comfort to me to know that I was able to connect with my mummy in that way. It was beautiful. All right, my treasures. So that's the story I'm going to tell you today. Sending you so much love, and may you be blessed along this life journey. Know the significance of you being here. It is mightily significant. So much love. Thank you for you.